Good evening. Today was Missy's first day ever working hay, and I chose not to video that, uh, but I think I'm going to tell the story because I think it's a useful story within the context of the training video. Um, Missy's only the second donkey I've ever trained. Abe was first. Abe was the first donkey that ever trained me, and he had a harder time than she is because I was a slow steady. So, one thing I have observed in my whole two donkey level of expertise is that it's easier for them to walk than it is to stand, and that they're more tolerant about work where you just walk and you don't stop. And a lot of the things I do include a lot of standing, and that's always been difficult for Abraham, and it's difficult for Missy. They'd rather just move on. And unfortunately, the things that I need to do, I need to go out here and stand while I fork up all the hay I can reach from here, and then move up. I don't know how far we moved, 10 feet maybe, and fork up that hay, do it again. It takes about 3, maybe 4 moves to fill a cart. Depends on how big the windrow is, of course. So I took Missy out. You've seen there's a video up here if you haven't seen it. It's about an hour-long, 3-part video of her working on the cart yesterday. But all the times that she had to stand, she was tied. And in the hayfield, I have nowhere to tie her. I have these windrows that run out across the land, and we walk along them and fork them up into the cart. And so there's nothing out there to tie to. So I have the orange rope. You've seen it if you've watched my videos, the one I call the emergency brake. It's a 25-foot, half-inch cotton rope. If I could have gotten a 3/4-inch cotton rope, I would have. But the half-inch is tolerable. I got a good big stop knot tied in the end of it. As I said the other day on this same topic, they're gonna run sometimes. I mean, my experience has been with my 2. But when you start with a donkey that doesn't know anything and you don't know that much either, sooner or later the 2 of you are going to make the same mistake on the same day, and they're going to run. And then what happens next depends on how well you've prepared for that to happen. And the long rope is part of that. If a donkey is running straight away from you, you get one and they get a good run and they're going straight away from you. When you run out of rope, there's not going to be any way to make them stop. And if they're straight away from you and you can't get out beside them, you just got to let them run. They won't run forever. They're not like horses. They won't, run forever. Now they will. They only know how wide they are, so that if they see something that they can get between and the cart won't, they will go between that. I've had that experience. But they won't run themselves into something. They're too smart. If they're running straight away, let them go. But the objective, if you're teaching them to stand, and there's a chance they may run at some point. Chica, come back over here, baby. Come on. Chica would, given a choice, live on cat shit, and we have cats. So I tried. That's not an authorized choice. I can't completely prevent it, but it's, Anyway, you're a good girl though. So if you can get out beside them and they start to run, then you've got a fair chance because of you're not trying to change their direction by much. If they're out on the end of a 20-foot rope from you, they want to run straight, but you're only trying to change their direction by a couple degrees, and you often have enough strength to do that. Um, they've got pretty strong necks, but even so. So your objective, if they do run on you, is to be out beside them, and your objective also, as I got reminded today, is to already be at the end of the rope, because if the donkey at a dead run takes 10 or 15 feet of rope through your hands, it gets remarkably warm quickly. I had on leather gloves, so it didn't hurt. Last time it happened to me, I got blisters. Um, so, uh, but today I was still up in the middle of the rope, and she took off, and my hands got pretty warm by the time I got to the stop knot. When they have to stand, they're more nervous. You know, when they're moving, I don't know what it is. I mean, I'm not a donkey. I just observe them. But typically they get more nervous. Yesterday, while Abe and I hauled hay, she was tied up in the spot in the stall that's closest to where I store the outdoor hay. And in order to store hay, I have to fork it up well higher than my head, well higher than her head, as high as I can reach with a 5-foot pitchfork. And so she was standing right there at that barricade, and the barricade's about eyeball high on her, but she can see over it. And the fork was going way up over her head, and the gobs of hay were going way up over her head, and I have to pat the hay down to compress it so that I can store more in a given space. And so I was up above her head, 2 feet away from her head, slapping on the top of this hay pile with a pitchfork. And that's why she was tied there. Usually that I tie her in a different spot, but I wanted her to have to watch all this, because stuff up over their heads frightens them, and hitting motions frighten them, and all this stuff is scary to them, and legitimately. So I was going to ask her to stand still. You've seen some of the videos of me with Abe. I'm behind the cart. I have the pitchfork. I pick up a gob of hay, and I lift it up and I put it on top of the pile that's on the cart, or I put it on top of the empty cart. And this particular hay we're gathering today got rained on once already in a windrow. And when you windrow the hay, it kind of wants to twist it. And I mean, if you happen to be a spinner, you know how to make yarn. The way you make yarn is you twist fibers as they lay along. And so you can pretty much turn hay into rope with a hay rake, no matter what kind of hay rake you got. But if you have to rake it additional times, it gets ropier, because every time you turn it over, you input twist into it. And once it gets rained on, you have to turn it over so the part on the bottom will dry. Hay is not ideal for hay to get rained on. So when the hay gets rained on, you have to wait some sunny hours, depending on the wind and the temperature and other things, until the top, everything you can see from the top is dry, and then you go out there with a hay rake and you turn that over again, so that what was laying on the wet ground is now up in the air, and the dry part is laying on what was the dry ground beside the windrow, because when you turn it, you lift it and put it back down beside where it was. But this hay got turned. It's been turned at least 3 times, which is about the minimum if it gets rained on in the windrow. That makes it pretty ropey. So when you stick a pitchfork into it and lift it, you're not just going to get a forkful, you're going to get maybe 4 feet of hay rope, big around, as a bushel basket. And that's pretty heavy, and it takes a swoosh to get it up in the cart, and it goes up high over their head and comes back down, and they're looking at it out of the back. They're facing the other direction, so they're doing this. I don't put blinders or blinkers on my donkeys. My opinion is that donkeys are happier and safer in the long run if they know everything that's going on around them. Horses are so nervous that you put blinders on them just forever, because if they ever find out what you're doing back there, they may just take for the tall timber. But donkeys are different, and so I prefer not to put blinders on them. But that means we do have to go through this new, first time with any event, anything, and so, and plus she can still graze while I work. She, I haven't ever had a bit in her mouth yet. I haven't put an overcheck on her, which is what keeps them from putting their head down to graze while they work. Abe always has to wear an overcheck, because if he grazes while we work, he can cripple himself in a day, a half a day, because of his chronic laminitis. And if he eats green grass, sooner or later it's going to wind up killing him. If I'm pretty good at keeping him out of it. And he has this overcheck. When he tries to put his head down, it pulls the bit back, and he says, "Oops, I don't think I'll do that." And he puts his head back up. She's never had a bit in her mouth. That's the way I train. That's a late stage item. The bit is for refined communications. And at the beginning, you're teaching go, stop, go left, go right, which is haw and G. And if you can get a 45-degree corner, 90-degree corner, when you need one around a fence post, and not run into the post with the cart and stuff like that, that's all good. But later, like the way Abe is now, when I can get him to take a half a step sideways or a whole step sideways, and a half a step backwards or a whole step backwards, then you would need a bit, because then you can put these little tiny refined messages to him of what you want. And so that's what bits are for. You don't break their jaw. Bits are because they're just really good communication tool. And so she wants to graze. Well, this hay field some of it's got grass in it, and some of it's got mud in it, and it was clump grass, so it wasn't all like a turf grass. And so if where she's standing there's not grass under, she wants to walk over there where the grass is. Well, this is where the hay is. She needs to stand here. So we're having this, and she really doesn't want to stand anyway. She just wants to keep walking, and I want her to stand. And so periodically she decides, screw this, I'm leaving. And so all told, I think we had 3, maybe even 4 runoffs today. And in one of them she got good and huffy and fussy and mad about the whole process, and she was bucking. The cart was on her. It had about 2 feet of hay in it, and she wanted to run, and it was running as fast as she could, and so she decided she'd buck it off, and she gave that a couple or 3 shots, but that didn't work. It stayed with her. I had her on the rope, and I was out right where I wanted to be. I was 90 degrees to her head and 20 feet away, and I had a hold of the stop knot. And if you've got that, and they want to run, and you've got an open circle around you, there's no buildings or trees or anything they can run into to break this. If you can just let them run in a circle, they're not going to make 2 rounds. She didn't ever make 2 rounds. I don't think she ever made a whole round. Abe made 2 rounds a couple times. He's firm-willed. But I don't think she ever made a whole round, but she gave about a half a round, about a half a circumference of bucking and carrying on, and she was just madder than a wet hen. And when she finished, I took her back over where we were, and I gave her a goodie, and we went back to work. But the second half of the first cart, because like I said, we stop, I fork up some hay, I get all I can easily reach from where I am, we move forward, we do that again. And it takes about 3 or 4 stops, depending on the size of the windrow, to get the cart full. And then we bring the cart full up to the barn, and then I back them up to where I'm going to put the hay, and I push it out of the cart and handle it from there. So about the last half of the first cartload, she was really huffy. And about the first half of the second cartload, she was pretty darn huffy too. And by about the second, maybe just the first round, about the second stop of the first cartload, she settled down. And she stood like a lady. She was a little bit wound, tight. But she stood like a lady. And uh, that's what you need. You want to, if you can finish on a good note, that's what they're going to remember is what happened last. The stuff in between, they won't forget it, but it's not what's left in them. It's not the taste in their mouth and the picture in their mind. So what she did was she stood like a lady. When I asked her to walk, she walked like a lady. She moved over a little bit to try to get grazing, and I moved her back, and she stood again. And we finished up. We brought her up here. I have one door in the barn that I put hay through that's on the same side of the barn as where we parked the cart. And they all know where we parked the cart. I mean, she's only been on it 6 or 7 times. She knows where we parked the cart. So I brought her up after that, and we got unloaded that where it goes, and then I forked it in. It takes me, I don't really know. I have a very poor sense of time, so all these time things are just guesses. But it takes me a few minutes to. There's probably 10, 15, 20 fork loads of hay on a cart load, and so if I park it like I did this time, I park it outside the building, so I have to fork it into the building on the floor, and then I have to fork it from the floor up onto the stack in the whatever room it goes in. And I did all that while she stood. Well, they all stand much better in the yard where the cart parks, because there's really no place to run to. This is where the cart parks, and she gets to graze, so she was standing and grazing, so she wasn't really put out much at all then. So I completely finished putting that hay up, and then I made her, and she was not in a very good mood, because after all these runaways and all this crap, they're like people. You get annoyed. It takes you a while to get over being annoyed. You'll get over it. It's not the rest of your life, but it takes a while, and they're just like us. So she's still pretty grouchy, and I was pretty grouchy too. I get tired. I get tired of dealing with runaways. It's a hassle. So I required her, and it took a little. You've seen how I make her go, and when they don't want to go, you go tug, tug, tug. If you just pull and hang on, they can do that. I mean, you'll be there when the sun comes up. They can do that all night. That's no problem. But if you go tug, 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 sometimes I rattle the snap. They're halter snaps are big heavy snaps, and you rattle and it goes. And sometimes you tug them a little bit sideways, make them pull them a little bit off their balance, so they have to kind of move a foot to regain their balance. And then they move a foot, they might as well go ahead and walk, and tug, 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 tug. And if you're tugging on one and they take a step, I mean, you drop the pressure instantly. The instant they do what you want, any part of it, you immediately reward them by removing whatever you're applying for pressure. If you're tugging on a rope, that's pressure. If you're pushing on them with a shoulder, that's pressure. If you're poking them in the cheek, that's pressure. I use all these things as pressure to make them move. I poke them in the hip bone when I want them to move over. And if that doesn't work, I push on them. But when they do what you want, whatever you're applying for pressure to signal them and possibly, apply pressure. I mean, when you're going tug, tug, tug on a lead rope, and they have to go like this with their neck over and over and over and over and over, they're pretty good at it. They can do it for a long time. But they get tired of it. And eventually they don't want to do it anymore. And so, forcing donkeys is not a good plan, because then you get them mad at you, and Abraham weighs about 750 pounds. Missy probably weighs about 650 pounds. I don't really want a 650-pound animal mad at me. I'd just rather be friends. We can all get along and do all this stuff. And so, Anyway, so I had to apply some pressure to get her to put the cart where I wanted to park it. And the only reason that we couldn't park it where it was is because I wanted her to finish the day doing something under specific direction. And that something was we moved the cart. She was standing in front of the barn with the cart behind one barn door, and I made her walk forward, around in a circle, back towards the barn adjacent to a different door. And then I made her turn in place through a 90-degree circle till the back of the cart was pointed at the barn and she was standing faced away from it. I told her she was a good girl, gave her another goodie, and put the cart away. Now, when I started that, she was in such a grumpy mood that she tried to run away from there. And so, you know how that works. We just had to do it again. You know, she had to walk around that same circle. She had to walk back over there, walk to where she was standing parallel to the barn, and then she had to turn 90 degrees again to get out. And by this time, I'm fairly grouchy, and I'm not pulling real gentle. I'm saying, "Get out here," you know. And so, uh, but when she stops, she still gets good girl. She still gets a pat on the head. She still gets a little bitty treat because she still did it. And the second time, she stood pretty much like a lady, and we put the cart away. And I knew for sure I was going to have to go get Abe. We'd only got 2 loads of hay. I had a whole day, you know. I've got hay still down. I cut too much this time, and so I'm been behind my own mistake. This making loose hay is still all new to me, and so I'm having to learn my balance, my abilities, my time. You know, my brain's made an awful lot of baled hay, and so it's harder for me to learn these new processes of making loose hay. I think it makes better quality hay, and I know it's vastly more energy efficient, and I know it's vastly less physically painful to me than hauling baled hay. And it's less painful than feeding baled hay. It's a lot easier. But, so I got too much down, so I'm really under pressure. You know, I'm trying to get it all up before another rainstorm rolls through. And so I put her up, and she had to stand all day. She was going to have to stand all day anyway if I did it with Abe. But as it was, she had to stand all day in harness with her collar on, her whole harness on, which he has to do sometimes. You know, it's life when you're a work animal. And he and I did all the rest of it, and he's really really good. He's really good. I think he's going to continue to get better. He's getting more and more skilled at getting what I want him to do in terms of motion to get the cart right where I want it. And the closer the cart is to where you want the hay, you know, like I said, the very last load we did today, I said this in another place, the very last load that Abe and I did today, we backed it right up to the door. I wanted that hay on the other side of it, and I pushed it out of the cart into the room from outside. So I only had to handle that hay one more time. Pushed it off the cart into the room, had Abraham walk forward a few steps so that he wasn't, you know, blocking my access to things. And then I only had to handle it one time to get it from on the floor up onto the pile. And that's the most efficiency I can get out of this. So he's really, really, really getting sharp. And I've been worried about his health. He's been too thin, but I think I'm getting a little weight back on him. And boy, he's got a good attitude, you know. And there's a thing they call willing about an animal, and it's a term that's hard to define exactly. But Abe is, in most ways, he's a very willing worker, and he's good. Missy will be. Don't get me wrong, she's going to be super good. This is all hard for her. Sydney was here yesterday, and we got Missy from Sydney. And Sydney told me that when she got Missy, Missy had never been within less than 500 feet from a human being in her life. Somebody adopted a Jenny off the Bureau of Land Management land turned that Jenny out on his field, and she was pregnant, and she was Missy's mom, Miss Kitty, as she was originally named. That was her mom, and she was born on the back 100 acres of a Missouri farm, and she had never been less than several hundred feet from a human being in her life. The day that Sydney caught her, put her in a horse trailer, hauled her home, and began teaching her to be a human partner. And so what she's doing with me, she's a 6-year-old donkey. She was a 3-year-old donkey when Sydney got her, and she'd never been touched. So in 3 years, she has come this far. She's really a good animal. But good animals still have to be worked through their fears and their willfulness. You know, when you take a boy kid and give him his first job, he's probably not a real good employee. It takes a while. I don't know about girl kids. I've never been one. But you know, donkeys are like that. Yes, they're willing workers, and no, that wasn't their first idea. They have to learn that they like that, and once they learn it, then they like it, and then they're happy, and they treat you good. You know, I mean, working with Abe's like taking your dog for a walk. Only we get stuff done. So, and Missy's going to be that good. She's going to be my road donkey. She's going to take me to the Walmart. She's going to take me to the hardware store, and she's going to take me to the lumber yard and bring home a load of 2x4s. I bet she does it too. She's good. So, thanks for coming along. That's this evening's training story. Bye-bye.